essentially are contrary to the core conservative faith that the church and the community adheres to. So the logic behind many of these campaigns are often also not clear. Sometimes the inflammatory trigger point is simply a soapbox for someone to stand on and have a counter view that makes them noticeable from everyone else within their community and attracts attention to them. And the IO, the influence operations strategists, who help coordinate and exploit these dynamics, are very aware of this. So while they will not be involved in speaking to someone like this pastor, they potentially are involved in amplifying the message that these people use and make a success of people who take these positions. Elsewhere, it's more kind of explicit. So this is a video that I'm going to play, and just be quiet. It's a fairly short video, just to show you how sophisticated some of the messaging can become, that uses extremists as basically shadow boogeymen, you know, the people to be scared of, and how it then turns the narrative around to say that we might be scared of extremists, but here we have a solution for you. I'll play the video.
ولكن حان وقت العقاب ولقد تمكنا وبفضل الله تعالى نضبط على هذا الوصي اللعين واليوم امام العالم اجمع سيعاقب على ما فعل. Hi, Justin. Justin, the video sound is quite low.
Oh, it's quite low. Not a problem. There's a link. We'll share this presentation with you afterwards. There's a link at the top. The message I think you got was it's framed as a propagandist video from insurgents, supposedly capturing a peacekeeper, a Russian peacekeeper, in other words, a Russian a Wagner mercenary, and then how he turns the tables on them. He shoots them, he rips down the kind of, I think it's a ISIS or an Al-Qaeda flag, and underneath it there's a flag of the US and of France, meaning that they are actually behind the insurgents. And then it says, we, Wagner, are the solution. And Wagner is the private military company associated very closely with Putin and with Russian intelligence agencies. It's also been active in Syria and elsewhere, and Libya and elsewhere in sub-Saharan Africa, including Mozambique. As you can see from that video, it's professionally produced. Our team, led by Fidel out of Senegal, use some very clever AI kind of analysis techniques and kind of face matching tools. And we've tracked down that person who pretends to be a mercenary in it, and he's a Russian actor, a mainstream Russian actor. So the message or the example that I'm trying to show you is that often extremist conflicts and extremist propaganda is hijacked by some of these larger geopolitical players that we're talking about. It's in their interests to have religious kind of dissent and violence because they can step into the vacuum that that creates. And this is one example of how that is used. Oh, apologies. Now I'm trying to get to the next slide. Just need to figure out how to do that. Ah, there we go. And the video itself is just the tip of the evidence. So our team then looked into where is this video being spread. And immediately after it was published almost in response to the capture of a Wagner mercenary in Mali. It was released, so the video was released shortly afterwards. And almost immediately it was released, 23 pro-Russian accounts amplified it. And you can see their reach was quite significant. 74,000 people engaged with it. Over 2 million people watched this video. And these numbers are old, they're from 2 weeks ago. So those numbers have probably increased exponentially since then. These 23 accounts that amplified it are part of an existing pro-Russian network that we believe is coordinated out of Moscow, and it targets a bunch of Westerns, all of which at the moment are going through democratic crises. And in many of them, Wagner, the mercenary group, is being suggested as a replacement for either ECOWAS or UN or EU or NATO peacekeeping forces. So the strategy here is that they're undermining faith in kind of established African and global peacekeeping missions to replace them with mercenaries who are often then paid in mineral concessions or in other access to resources in a country. It's being amplified, as you can see on the screen. We traced the original video back to a pro-Russian media channel. It's been amplified by some of these types of accounts that I mentioned previously, these pretend media or these echo chamber media, and they're two distinctly different things. So the pretend media are the ones who look and feel and act like media, but they're not really journalists. The echo chamber ones are genuine vloggers and bloggers who've taken a polarized position to try and stand out from the audience and grow a following. Both of them are sharing this content widely with their existing audiences. That's not the only example. Again, the sound's probably not good. But here's an example of an even more sophisticated production. Why? Because it doesn't bother using human actors. It's used an entire creative studio to create an animated movie about the conflict in Central African Republic. And it's even more explicit in terms of how it frames extremists as the bad guys who you need a Western power to step in and save us from as Africans. I'll play the video now. Apologize for the noise, the sound.
Погибнут десятки тысяч людей, возможно, даже сотни. Они вырезали столько невинных, что воды в банке стали красными от крови. А дни, когда процветающей страны с многомиллионным населением скоро не останется ничего. Помогите нам! К этому моменту за плечами ангела были сотни. Со злом все еще не мог разломить. О том, как гибнут. Главной задачей было даже не уничтожить страх. Стеснить их из города. Кто не пострадал? Наш герой справлялся с этой задачей. Не жалея сил, он поливал врагов дождем из свинца, очищая от монстров улицу за улицей. Вы хотели убивать их в их же жилищах. Теперь я буду убивать вас в джунглях. Вы, простые жители цар, снова доверили мне свои жизни. В это нелегкое время я отвечаю за судьбы людей. Но смогу ли я справиться с этой ответственностью? Я справлюсь, а не отступлю. Не предам поверивших меня людей. Видимо, так распорядился Бог. Все напуганы, но бои продолжались. Главное, что жизни невинных были спасены.
Мама, почему трясется земля? Не бойся, милая. Это ангел, пришедший с далекого севера, спасает наши жизни и наш город.
Некогда райское место напоминало филиал ада. На место убитого врага тут же вставали трое. Казалось, это может продолжаться вечно. В момент отчаяния в нашем герое просыпалась его скрытая сила, когда надежды почти не осталось.
So I'll stop it there because it just goes on with more of the same. But as you can see, it's quite a graphic depiction between supposed good and bad, the zombie jihadists, and then the Russian mercenaries who, as you can see on this frozen image, are cast as savior angels who swoop in to save you from the zombies. It's a narrative that we see being repeated in Mozambique, where again, there's a Al-Shabaab insurgency or ISIS-linked insurgency, And again, Wagner's been called in to assist in ways that violate citizen rights and lead to the same kind of abuses you're seeing in Ukraine. Hamangel Media, who I think you had someone do a panel discussion a day or two ago, has been shining a consistent spotlight on some of these massacres in the Central African Republic that are blamed on insurgents and extremists. But in fact, the evidence suggests that they have been committed by Wagner-related supposed peacekeepers. The important thing here is that firstly, you can see the value of the production. A lot of money, a lot of resources went into this. Notable is that it's not just targeting an African audience. You saw some of the text in there is in kind of Russian. And it's also because at the same time, the extremists as the evil doers to African audiences, the Russians or the Chinese or the French, whoever is behind these campaigns, need to sell that same message to their home audience, that they are heroes out there doing good in the world, to get public support for these interventions in our countries. The fact that they're using comics, and this same content is going out on platforms that target the youth, is super important because they are trying to bypass traditional media gatekeepers. By doing it in comic and animated format, you are trying to make sure that you are reaching people who avoid traditional news, and they view this as a bit of entertainment initially before getting sucked into it. It's youth, it's people who don't like news, and it's easy to consume and share. This specific account hasn't been shared a lot because the person's saying this is propaganda, but we found it going far wider elsewhere where people didn't understand that it was propaganda. A second component of this is that it's the saviors from Russia. An investigation that Fidel's team did a week ago has now confirmed that the president's Facebook account, and Fidel, correct me if I got the president wrong, but it's the presidency's Facebook account, is now co-managed directly out of Russia. So it's managed by a local administrator, and the second administrator on that account is someone based in Russia. So you have something as key to a country as the presidency and their public image and their public communication tools now being directly managed out of a foreign, non-African country, to show just how far these tentacles can expand. It's not just these. A lot of these two videos I've shown you are building on the success of an even bigger production, again, out of the Central African Republic. It's a movie called The Tourist, that again casts using like Hollywood and Bollywood and Nollywood type of formats about an action kind of movie with a war hero in it. And it's a full-scale movie. This, click on the link to see our partner DFR Labs investigation into it that Alan and Fidel's team assisted with. But the reason why I'm not showing you that video and I'm rather showing you this graph on the screen is this blue part here is where they artificially amplified the spread of the video on the internet, on social media, on dark social and elsewhere, getting people to share it and watch it. The yellow pieces are where suddenly organic engagement, so this is authentic engagement, no one's forcing you to look at it, is starting to take over from the coordinated spreading of the propaganda. And so it shows you how successful these initial amplifications are of narratives and propaganda material that uses extremist messaging and extremist groups as the bad guys to get people to watch it and to sell you a supposed political solution from outside of the continent. This specific video was, or movie, was amplified by 310 Facebook accounts in just 24 hours. Compare that to the first one I showed you, which was just 23 accounts. And you start understanding the level of infrastructure and back-end support that goes into this. Those online propaganda kind of interventions, building on the fear of extremism, is then also replicated offline. This again are examples from the Central African Republic, which has almost been the laboratory for Russia specifically on many of these disinformation techniques. And in this one, we can see that they are now actually making concrete many of these strategies. So rather than just doing videos about their heroes, they are actually building statues to them in the capital of Central African Republic, and the statues are being unveiled by the president of the country. And it's quite openly being done by Wagner itself, a mercenary group alongside the president of a country launching a statue. These are complemented by everything from art shows to beauty contests or pageants, both in the target countries and then back home in Russia itself. All of this is, sorry, the text on this video on the screen hasn't been updated. All of this then builds momentum and public opinion that they can weaponize through copy and paste campaigns. And so this is just a screenshot, ignore the text. I'll update that before I share the deck with you. But these are some examples that our team detected fairly recently in March of copy and paste content being shared across hundreds of different groups using the same photos and the same messages. You can see it's like literally the same emojis, the same text, just copy and pasted across various groups, sending a message saying that our only way to save ourselves from the extremists is to welcome in a new foreign military power to allow them to drive our country. And by doing this, they're trying to build momentum. So the people who see this all over the place thinks, it must be widely accepted and believed by everyone else. And so maybe I should take it more seriously. But also it distorts the actual algorithms at the social media companies who start surfacing this content because they think it's trending or popular content. And so they're gaming the social platforms themselves. It's not just in West Africa. We see exactly these same strategies, for example, in Ethiopia, where we see the Russian Orthodox Church being used as a spiritual tool or weapon and to link up with the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. And as you can see from that big picture at the top, where they conflate the patriarch of the church with Putin himself and with the agendas, and they start framing Russia and its military as a defense for Christians in Syria. So again, saying that there's a track record there of, again, defending Christians from kind of Muslims. It's a narrative that we see repeatedly recast for different parts of the continent at least. So the message in Ethiopia is slightly different from that message I've just showed you in Central African Republic or Mali or Burkina Faso, but it's not new. It's exactly the same messaging that was used in Syria, that was used in Libya and elsewhere. So extremism becomes kind of the fuel for some of these larger global kind of campaigns. Again, these are some screenshots from Kenya, which is going into an election in August. And you'll see again, that top picture is a very bad Photoshop of one of the candidates' face onto Al-Shabaab kind of militants. And again, talking about, you can see there the mention of Turkey. So again, it's even the counter messaging is even kind of, again, using extremists and their fights and their kind of ideology as ammunition for local political kind of arguments, either to smear or to instill fear in people. It's all about visual communication. And it doesn't just go to that. You'll see that they try and use the corruption that we all have in our governments as part of a narrative to link kind of candidates to extremist dark money markets or dark influence markets, as you can see in this one here around another candidate in Kenya and the supposed links to ISIS and Al-Qaeda funding networks, including kind of Turkey kind of money laundering. It's a narrative that, as we say here, gets laundered repeatedly. All that gets changed are the faces. Why? Because it's compelling. Secondly, extremist groups, to protect themselves, deliberately operate in secret and are kind of shady about their financing, their leadership structures, their accountability. And that becomes easy for influence strategists and disinformation operators to hijack for their own purposes. So that's, I think I've spoken longer than I'd intended to. I was going to give you a quick run through just how the Ukrainian kind of conflict is being again weaponized across Africa to feed into these wars, and how religion is increasingly becoming part of that alongside reverse racism. So our defense against racism by the North, and how that plays out in kind of extremist kind of narratives and ideologies, including how our struggles and our wars, often at the hands of extremists, are not considered by the world to be as important as what's happening in blonde, blue-eyed kind of Ukraine. Again, a lot of the defense behind these strategies is using visual kind of materials, satire, and entertainment as a defense, saying, it's not news, I'm just entertaining, or I'm making a joke, or I'm having this is an opinion piece, and therefore I can have an opposing view. These are used callously by the strategists who are pumping out this propaganda to incite, but also to hide behind press freedom defenses. And again, we see them using a kind of pretending to be fact checkers. So it's the same stuff I've just showed you before, but now you start seeing used at scale again as the same recipe book, or what the Americans would call a playbook, in Ukraine, to try and kind of head off allegations of war crimes and human rights abuses there. So that's what I had for you to share today. My message is that this kind of shining an evidence data kind of light on extremist messaging and disinformation in Africa is not just about exposing the extremist message, but about how that message can be hijacked by others who have a very different agenda, and how extremist messaging can be set up as the foil or the kind of the bait for an alternative political solution. And so how we need to draw those lines, and how we need to consider that in our investigations, so that we don't play into the trap of kind of amplifying some of these campaigns. If you have suggestions for things, examples similar to what I've showed that you would like us to investigate, or if you think that there are accounts and sock puppets that you think we should add to our watch lists, or if you have organizations that you think should be working alongside Alan and Fidel's teams, then please reach out to us. We work through partnerships. We're all about coalition building and sharing of tools. Back to you guys if there are any questions. Yeah, go for it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Justin, for that comprehensive presentation. I think that sets the pace for the day, and what we are going to focus on as throughout the day, or to discuss throughout the day. So I don't know if there are any questions from the audience, specifically, related to this presentation. Any questions? Questions, comments?
No problem if I've overwhelmed you with too much detail and too many videos. If there are questions afterwards, I'm more than happy to kind of send them through. Alan will share.
Looks like you don't have any questions, Justin.
That's cool. I was just saying, if there are any questions afterwards, Alan, I'd be more...
Can't.
Thanks, Alan. I was just saying, if there are any questions afterwards, because I think that there was a lot of detail in that video, so maybe a bit overwhelming in the presentation at least. If there are questions afterwards, I'm more than happy to answer them. If you have leads or suggestions on things that you want verification, we're more than happy to assist. So please do not be shy. We're here to assist and to share the resources and the information that we have. Reach out. We'd love to help. Thank you, Alan. Back to you.
I think there's one question for you, Justin. As you are wrapping up, there's someone who wanted to ask a question.
Go for it.
Okay.
Hello, Justin. I wanted to ask this the presentation you showed us, there was a lot of the use of AI and all that. So are there other ways that, like, I'm not saying it's complicated, but, other ways that you can identify all those, the misinformation and disinformation they are spreading. And, there's some of those videos that were pretty obvious. How do you, catch the ones that are not, that are very, very, they're so, how do I say, they're not easy to unmask. Like that video of the Wagner thing was pretty obvious as well to me that this is just some funny stuff. But if you get ones that, how do you unearth them?
So I think, I'm an old school dinosaur journalist. Am I back on? Can people hear me? Ellen, can people hear me? Cool. So the joke inside our organization is that I'm the dinosaur, the old guy, and I work with lots of kind of younger, cleverer people. So my answer to your question is that the AI tools are not an obstacle because they basically are just something you plug into. You cannot do any of this analysis if you don't do old school journalism, which means simply making lists of suspicious accounts, lists of trigger language, so keywords that you hear used over and over again. That's in some of this messaging, because the keywords are the things that become the trigger in communities to get people to act. So firstly, what we call actor lists, which are the accounts that always are pushing one specific type of message. You heard me speaking a lot about pro-Russian or pro-Chinese accounts, but you have others that push a pro kind of life or a pro kind of choice. If we're talking about American politics at the moment, narrative or agenda. And you need to start making lists of those accounts because they become your early warning system. You can see what they are sharing, who they are friends with, who they follow, and what kind of networks they participate in. And like any investigative journalist who is investigating financial crime or corruption, which is my background, I'm originally a anti-corruption and a kind of a war reporting journalist. If you investigate any of those networks, it's understanding how people or accounts are connected to each other, when they coordinate with each other, and when they are strategically silent. So I would say that you don't need large tools for. You simply need to have a curious mind and be diligent in terms of recording or making these watch lists. Alongside that, the trigger language includes both words. So often it's in a local indigenous language. We're busy building one in Kenya at the moment, for example, around hate speech related to the elections. And it includes a lot of religious terms, as well as tribal kind of insults. So trigger language can just be normal words. It can be hashtags that are used on social media to create kind of trending content. I would say that those are the two entry points. Once you've got those, the AI or other tools, which you don't have to run yourselves, they're available online, many of them open source and free, or through a team like Alan or Fidel, you'd have an expert who helps you use them. So I think that don't get scared by the AI. I'm not a data scientist. I'm not a technologist. I'm basically a journalist who's just figured out how to work with people like Alan, who comes from a forensic audit background, and people like Fidel, who comes from a data science, computer engineering background. I hope that helps answer your question.
Oh, yeah. She says yes, that answers her question. Any other question? Okay, there's one more question. mention your name and your organization.
Good morning. My name is Afisa from Daily Trust. Of course, a lot of misinformation is shared every now and then. And as journalists, we have the duty to fact check them. But the preponderance of this misinformation is so much that you are constrained to what do you fact check. So at what point do we have to fact check a particular misinformation?
Really good question. And Daily Trust is one of my favorite media groups. We've worked with your media group, I think, for the last 12 years. You guys do an awesome job in a very difficult place. I think just very quick to your question is, I don't think there is any one correct answer. The way we do it is that we say we've got limited resources and we operate on the basis that we serve the public good, because we are defended as journalists, and our defense as journalists is that we do a public good. So we use two tools. We use something called a index of harms. And so we say, you know, we've got a checklist, which I'm happy to share with you from the PesaCheck team, that lays out what are the most extreme harms that there are. And then we have a checklist to say, is this piece of misinformation or disinformation, how does it rank on this? Will it lead to violence? Will it lead to undermining people's belief in medical solutions? Will it lead to people no longer believing in democratic processes? And there's a whole list of them. And what we do is that we fact check the content that scores highest on that list consistently. So if you're sitting with 10 claims on your desk and you've got one piece that potentially will lead to violence, like we saw that example from Nigeria that Anita found for us, of the fake videos that kind of led to communal violence, that takes priority over something about an entertainment piece where, you know, kind of a film star or a singer is claiming something that's not true about someone else. So you need to balance. Often your editors will want you to do the entertainment piece because that might get more kind of audience hits. But the reality is that we've got a public duty and we need to kind of choose the things that will cause the biggest harm. So that's the one category, is harms. Then we have a second set of criteria. And that set of criteria is this content spreading and going viral? So even if something could potentially lead to violence, it is so blatant and is so badly done and is shared by someone with such a small audience that no one is really engaging with it. And so we take the stuff that does the most harm, that is being spread most widely. It's going viral, it's overperforming, and there are some simple tools for you to check that, even if you just look at the likes and the shares. But there are actually some free tools you can use to see how many different accounts are sharing it. And we try and prioritize the stuff that is becoming a wildfire, that is already spreading. And we try and debunk it and fact check it as a way of stopping that fire from spreading any further. Sometimes our report can't do that. And so what we do is we have partnerships with TikTok, with Facebook, or with Meta at least, so it's both Instagram and Facebook, and also even with WhatsApp. And now we're busy concluding a partnership with Twitter, and we can share our fact checks with those platforms, and they stop the spread of the content on the platform itself. Because often the media themselves are not powerful enough to actually stop it in its tracks. Only the tech companies can do that. I'm not certain if that helps you. If it does, and you want examples of these two criteria or checklists that we use, I'm more than happy to get the folks share it with you in the next hour or so.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Justin, for your response. I think in the interest of time, I'll only take those two questions. We are scheduled to go on a break right now, and then once we come back, we'll be discussing data journalism as a topic. And Joseph will be leading the session, and he'll be showing you some tips and tricks that he uses together with his team to actually visualize and also find the data related to probably religious extremism, but also any type of data. Thank you, Justin, and yeah, you're free to leave the Zoom meeting.
Go well, and I love those large throne chairs at the top of the room. You should bring some back. But anyhow, guys, go well. Thank you for giving me the time. Shout if you need anything.